So a couple weeks ago at Reed College, a student protest group took over a classroom, or they wanted to do a silent protest for Humanities 101. And they'd done that all last year because they are of the mind that Humanities 101 is, in their words, white supremacist and centers white culture. And Humanities 101, so far as I've seen from the syllabus and what they talk about, is basically a roots of Western civilization course. So they talk about the Greeks, they talk about Gilgamesh, they probably talk about the Hebrews, and they provide a foundation for an understanding of Western culture as it's developed so far. Now, according to the students that protested, that's inherently racist because it doesn't talk about black voices and it doesn't talk about other races. It's only talking about white society, which is kind of ridiculous because it's Mediterranean. But regardless of that, I'm going to do a video where I go through and I kind of point by point try to figure out their demands and so on and so forth. But I wanted to make a note about the millennial generation, or this generation of college students, and compare them to the college students of the boomer generation, the college students of the 60s. And I want to throw out and possibly develop a theory that both the boomers and the millennials came of age in a time of rapid media renovation. The boomers were the first generation to grow up with TV, with this very novel, very, very powerful tool of communication. And so when the boomers came into their volitional own, they expected from themselves and from the world to be able to change the world as much as the world had been changed while they were growing up. And if that holds true, I think that that's similar with the millennial generation. This is the generation that grew up with a radically rapid renovation of the way that human beings operate, that culture goes back and forth, that communication occurs. And their renovation that they came into their development witnessing was the internet and was computers. And so I think that there is a similarity between the millennials and the protestingness of the millennials and the protestingness of the boomers, insofar as now they expect to be able to change the world as much as the world had been changed while they were coming of age. And particularly with the millennials, from what I've seen, is that they are very impatient for change. And I think that has to do with the media of the internet, with media of computers. So when you're dealing with computers, you'll notice that they're always changing. When we're dealing with the internet, it's always being updated. And there's always something new, or there's always a new platform, or there's a new way of communicating, and so on and so forth. And so I see that they want constant updates. They want to be able to, the millennials, the protesting millennials, want to renovate the user interface of culture. And the difficulty of that is, and something that we all need to help them learn, and we all need to learn ourselves too. I don't mean to be derogatory to young people. I believe in them very firmly. I think their energy, it should be directed in ways that will really make the change that they are thirsting for and longing for. Maybe not all the change, but at the same time, what they need to learn, what we all need to learn, is that with a lot of these demands with the students, what it comes down to is that they want to have a surface level change. They want the interface itself to be updated. So with regards to racism, they want colleges to show a different set of races than just this white race. And unfortunately they use this rhetoric of white supremacy and racism just by looking at the interface that they're dealing with. And maybe there is some truth to that. Maybe it does really affect us to be represented by our own categories, to be represented in the authorities that we interact with, the people who are teaching us. Maybe it does have a lot of power for us to see ourselves represented in that. And I don't want to deal with privilege, but there might be a grain of psychological truth and necessity for different races to be able to look up to people of the same race in these institutions. But the problem is that if you want to just change the interface, you're really being blind to everything that's happening underneath that interface. We're really, and I think most everybody is, just by a matter of necessity, extremely blind to all the code that's rolling around underneath the interface of culture. And I see intersectionality want to attack that code or want to rewrite that code by talking about implicit bias and institutional racism, like these very macro and micro aggressions or so on and so forth. But I think that that is one way of looking at the code and not necessarily the correct or the fullest way that we can look at the code. So that's just some thoughts that we see these young people being very impatient, which is natural, and very radical and want to completely renovate society according to the terms that they've inherited through the progressive movement, through activist culture, through the permutations of feminism and the civil rights movement that have gone on past those very gross objectives that they were first started to confront with regards to feminism and civil rights, just very grossly, in the very large sense, very chunky sense, just the right to vote and the right towards equal fairness. And since that has been progressing, that whole movement of feminism and of racism and whatnot needs to become finer and finer and finer and deal with smaller and smaller and subtler instances of, racism or whatever, or sexism or whatever. And the problem is that the tools need to become finer and finer and finer as you deal with finer and finer things, as well as the skill set of those who are wielding the tools. You need to become more and more careful to deal with more and more small things. So that's just kind of some thoughts about why we're witnessing a big outburst with the college-age students right now, and why I think it's very similar to what was happening in the 60s. Goodbye.